In the brutal, island-hopping campaigns of World War II, US forces faced an enemy unlike any other, the Japanese soldier. To the world, they were the unbreakable warriors of the Pacific, men who would gladly choose death over the disgrace of capture. Look at the numbers. During the blood-soaked Iwo Jima campaign, where roughly 21,000 Japanese soldiers fought, less than 1% surrendered. The vast majority fought to the absolute death or took their own lives. In US mainland camps, there were 69 German prisoners of war for every single Japanese POW. The common theory? The ancient Bushido warrior code strictly forbade surrender. But here is the shocking truth. The Bushido Code was only a small piece of the puzzle. There were actually 8 hidden reasons why Japanese soldiers chose to die. But by April 1945, the US Military Intelligence and Psychological Warfare Group cracked the code. They launched a brilliant campaign that shattered the enemy's will to fight, causing the Japanese surrender rate to skyrocket to an unbelievable 20% in the Philippines. How did the US turn fanatical fighters into willing prisoners? Let's dive deep into the ultimate US PsyOps masterstroke. To defeat the enemy's mind, US intelligence first had to understand it. They surveyed captured Japanese soldiers and discovered 8 massive psychological hurdles that prevented them from giving up. Reason number 1. A complete lack of knowledge about their hopeless military situation. The Japanese high command fed their soldiers pure fantasy. They were told that Germany had defeated the Allies and that the Japanese Imperial Army was currently invading San Francisco. They had no idea their navy was at the bottom of the ocean and their homeland was starving. Reason number 2. The twisted interpretation of the Bushido Code. The modern Japanese military hijacked this ancient code, brainwashing troops into believing that surrender meant ultimate disgrace. They were told that a surrendered soldier could never return home and his family would live in permanent shame. However, the original code actually demanded generosity to a defeated enemy. Reason number 3. The fear of their own officers. Even if a Japanese soldier realized the war was lost and wanted to live, he was terrified his own commanding officer would discover his intentions and execute him on the spot. They were trapped in a suicidal cult of absolute obedience. But reason number 4 was the largest, most terrifying factor of them all. The absolute fear of American brutality. Based on over 500 captured Japanese documents, US intelligence made a chilling discovery. Japanese commanders had painted the Americans as bloodthirsty monsters. An overwhelming 75% of Japanese soldiers believed that if they surrendered, they would face unspeakable torture. They were told they would be burned alive in boiling oil or crushed alive under the heavy steel tracks of American Sherman tanks and bulldozers. They were fed horrific, fake stories. Rumors spread that the US had strung up 3,000 Japanese POWs with wires straight through their hands and rolled over them with a steamroller. To an exhausted Japanese soldier sitting in a muddy trench, taking his own life wasn't just about honor anymore. It was about escaping a horrifying, agonizing death at the hands of a ruthless enemy. To win the war, the Americans realized they had to do the impossible. They had to convince a deeply brainwashed enemy that the United States military was civilized and that life was not a cheap commodity. By early 1945, the US military knew they had to kill the lies, not just the soldiers. Enter the US Psychological Warfare Campaign. American B-29 bombers began dropping millions of leaflets over Japanese positions. These weren't bombs, they were weapons of truth. Leaflets titled, "Open Your Eyes," fell like snow from the sky. They showed the undeniable reality.
The Japanese fleet was wiped out. Germany had surrendered on May 9th, and Japan's myth of absolute invincibility was nothing but a sinking ship. The destiny they fought for was an illusion. To counter the fear of torture and family disgrace, the US dropped photos of actual Japanese POWs. These men weren't being tortured. They were eating good food, smoking cigarettes, and playing games. The leaflets even promised total anonymity, stating that Japan would never know they surrendered, protecting their families back home from any shame. But there was one final, massive hurdle. Even if a soldier wanted to live, he didn't know how to safely surrender without getting shot by nervous American troops. The solution? The surrender pass. These passes contained simple, life-saving instructions. I cease resistance, raise a white cloth, drop your rifle, and cross the river with your hands up. To ensure this worked, US troops were strictly ordered, do not harm a Japanese surrendering soldier. Any American violating this order faced severe punishment, even execution.
The absolute climax of this psychological warfare was the surrender pass. It gave terrified Japanese soldiers a safe, step-by-step way out of the meat grinder. The instructions were simple. Raise a white cloth, drop your Arisaka rifle, and walk peacefully towards American lines. But the real genius was the promise of absolute anonymity. The US guaranteed that their families back in Japan would never find out they surrendered, completely saving them from the cultural shame and the wrath of the Bushido Code. The results of this campaign were absolutely staggering. In the brutal Philippine and Okinawa campaigns, the surrender rate skyrocketed from less than 1% to 15%, and in some isolated units, up to a massive 20%. Thousands of lives were saved on both sides. The US military proved a profound point. You don't just break a deeply brainwashed enemy with bombs and bullets. You break their fear with truth and humanity. If you found this untold tactical history mind-blowing, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and let us know in the comments what military secret we should uncover next.